Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam says every good deed is multiplied by 10 to 700 times. We know that when we do a good deed, Allah gives us between 10 to 700 generally, according to our intention. Okay, so and for what a bad deed, He gives us one bad deed. For one good deed, He gives us 10 and multiplies it according to the intention. However, fasting is unique. Why? Allah says, and this is a very strange saying that Allah says in this Hadith Qudsi. He says, as for fasting, I reward it. Well, hang on a minute, He's rewarding everything in the first place. So what, does He not reward for that, but He rewards for fasting? So this is obviously metaphoric, this. What's it mean? It means it's incredibly special fasting. I give it, it has a special place, and I'm going to give it something beyond just reward. Okay. So the scholars then go into, what on earth does this mean? How do we understand that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala rewards fasting unlike any other? Because the strange thing about fasting is, fasting's a non-act. You're getting rewarded for doing nothing. You're sitting there and you're getting reward. Fantastic. That's the first thing. The second thing is that, so from that aspect, it's very strange fasting. It's actually a non-act and we're getting reward for it. But there's a wisdom why Allah chose fasting for Ramadan. Because in your day, you've got to get on with your day. You couldn't say, imagine in Ramadan if the ruling was you've got to spend your whole day in worship. You couldn't do it. We'd all have to take Ramadan off for the year, and then they really would say that it's not economic, like Islam's not practical and so forth. No, Islam's very practical, because it's saying in the day you have to engage in your worldly life, but there's an act of worship you can do where you're constantly getting reward regardless of what you're doing. Because as you're fasting in the day, as long as you're not thinking, oh God, when am I going to... You're having a good old grump about it, But other than that, even if you're heedless, and you're engaged in things not thinking about your fasting, you're getting reward. That's the reality. So it's the most practical act of worship you can do in your day. And then once the day ends and it's night, what do? We engage, well, let's make it a bit more general. We engage in the most engaged, like fasting's the least engaging act of worship. Because you can get on with everything else and still be an act of worship. Whilst prayer is the most engaging act of worship. Because you've got to give like zakat, you're just giving the money and that's it. Hajj, you can still be doing a number of things even though you're on Hajj. But prayer, you've got to give your absolute focus of body, spirit and mind. And so it's that contrast. And so Allah says in the night engage yourself. And I say we're really blessed. And we're going to see this these days because we're constantly in active worship. Now everyone's thinking they're too long, or maybe we should shorten them, and all these sorts of things, trying to find legal loopholes for it. But you've got to look at things from a metaphysical point of view. You've got to look beyond what's in front of us and see the wisdom in why these are blessed. Look, depending on the time you're starting your fast, you are 24 hours engaged in worship, really. Okay. Because we feel like night from Maghrib all the way to when the dawn comes in, we're in Tarawih basically. We break Maghrib, eat, and then we're right to the mosque praying Tarawih. We fill the night whether we want to or not. We don't have to do any extra acts of worship. And so that's what's so blessed about these summer months of Ramadan, is that even if we wanted to be lazy, it's very difficult. You're engaged in worship regardless. And so think of the reward of that. Where 24 hours for 30 days we're engaged without having to do anything really extra. We don't have to do extra tahajjud prayers. And we have to shorten our tarawihs just to get them in the first place. So which is interesting. And so we're doing the bare minimum really these days in the summer, but we're getting the most reward because we're constantly filling our time. And so the other thing they were saying, because people historically, what did they use fasting for? As I said, they used it in order to sort of give up on this world and engage with God. If you look at, like, for example, other like the Hindu practices and Buddhist practices, they used fasting for self-mortification in order to basically give up on the body and to connect to Allah. And there is an element of truth to that, in that basically when you're fasting, it's as if you are adorning yourself with certain of God's attributes, because you're saying, I have no need. Okay. But the irony of it is you come around to the realization that you are in need. So you are displaying to God, I don't have need of food, I don't need a drink. This is a quality of the divine. ghina, basically, self-sufficiency. I don't need anything. And so you feel that sense of, self-satisfaction. I don't need things. So like Allah's contentment, His rida, you feel that sort of contentment that I don't need all these things I strive for in the rest of the year. And so Ramadan is a sense of a detox. It's an opportunity to basically detox yourself spiritually, physically and financially from things. But at the same time, the irony is, after a while you say, hang on a minute, I do need something. Yeah, and that's when you feel your dependency on God. That's when you remind yourself that you aren't self-sufficient, you do need God in your days. Fasting is a very, very practical tool in order to connect with the divine. And so it's something that we should always have as part of I always recommend people have a regular fasting habit, whether it's 3 days in the month, or whether it's every Monday, Thursday, or it's just Monday. People should get into the habits of these. It's something, and now now the non-Muslims are telling us to do this. You've got intermittent fasting, and you've got what's the other one? The 5-2 they call it. Yeah. So they're all recognising that fasting is something that's very, very important. And you get to a point where what's one of the blessings of fasting is, I definitely felt this, is that you feel relief. You think, oh my goodness me, I don't need to put actually putting food in you is a burden. Yeah. Because you start to get used to, you notice this with about 10 days into Ramadan, you start saying, I don't really need to eat all that food that I was eating before. We soon forget that after Ramadan. But it's just a regular reminder that I don't need to put, and actually I'm making myself heavy, I'm making myself lethargic by eating, and so forth. Look what I can achieve. And that's what these summer months are really making us realise, my God, I can achieve amazing things. If non-Muslims, they're flabbergasted, they're thinking, how do you guys do it? And we've got 5, 6, 7-year-olds doing it as well. It actually blows their mind. Just even fast one day, some people find it a struggle. And so I think Ramadan's a reminder of what we can achieve, our potential. And also, I think it's very important that we use Ramadan in this day and age as a detox, because we really do abuse our bodies with the sort of toxins we put into our bodies. And so I try every Ramadan to eliminate certain things of my diet, like sugar or whatever. That Ramadan I'm going to try it and see how I feel. And you don't have to do the whole of Ramadan, just do 10 days, do 20 days, whatever you're able to. Just I want to see what I can achieve, and I want to see what effect it has on me. Is my mind clearer? Do I feel more vitality and so forth? Just to test yourself with Ramadan. Just don't use it as a means as about just fasting for religious sake and then praying. So use it as a time to actually see what impact you can have and changes you can have in your life as well. I think that's a huge benefit as well. Any questions there?
Just might be a bit off topic. In terms of deeds being multiplied, how people tend to give their zakah during Ramadan. Yeah. Would you recommend that?
Yeah, that's generally in Morocco they don't do that, but I've noticed in the Pakistani and the Asian community they give zakah in Ramadan. That's the reason it's said. I don't know how authoritative it is though, that the Sahaba used to give it in Sha'ban. The reason they gave it in Sha'ban was so they could have that amount ready for Ramadan. Okay, but regardless. The thing is, you're knowing that when you give that wealth to people who are needy, they're breaking their fast on that food and so forth, and so you're getting that reward. And so, as in Ramadan, the more even the small acts become major acts and of high significance, of great significance. And people should definitely, as I said, the 3 main acts of Ramadan you've reminded me is fasting, prayer, and charity, and then connecting with the community. But unfortunately, that's a little bit difficult, the connecting with the community here, because it's so late. It's difficult to do the iftaris. But just even if I know some people, what they do is they give out dates before Ramadan, so people will breaking that, give it to non-Muslims as well, just to say that it's Ramadan, we're doing these things, so people get a flavour, and give charity out. I say, even give charity out to needy non-Muslims as well, not just the Muslims, because they realise, wow, this Ramadan, we like Ramadan. We get stuff, we get biryani from next door, and the poor people think, look, they're very charitable, the Muslims in Ramadan. Just don't confine it to the Muslim community. I think it's really important we reach out with charity to the wider community as well.
Sure.
Yes.
In regards to this hadith, is the opposite true with bad deeds?
Yeah, they say that. It's multiplied. Yeah. So basically, you've highlighted a point here, is that Ramadan is about abstaining, fasting is about abstaining. So it's more important that you avoid things in Ramadan than do things in Ramadan. We're not saying you shouldn't do extra stuff in Ramadan, you should, but the focus more, you should highlight more on, I want to try to avoid certain things. And so we know the hadith about, if someone starts trying to have a good old fight with you in Ramadan, you say, I'm fasting. You say, look, I don't want to engage in things. And so the focus is more on abstinence. And so because we know that if a good act is rewarded so much, then what about a bad act? The more sacred a time, the more we have to show respect to it. Just like Mecca. They say when you're in Mecca, you should be more conscious of sins, because this is a place that's of great veneration, reverence before Allah, and so you should respect it. Does that answer your question? Yeah. Can we come to the next one? Yeah.
Can I just ask again regarding this hadith? It says about obviously 10 deeds multiplying up to 700.
Yeah.
Right? That's like any normal day, isn't it?
Yeah.
In any normal day.
Depending on intention.
Ramadan, are those being raised? Is the status raised for the deeds?
Yes, because we have a hadith. It's slightly weak, but I think I can't remember 70,000. Like one nafil prayer is like performing.
Is that an authentic? That
it's
is
not
about 1/3 is equivalent to 70,000, and then your nafil goes to your sunnah.
It's weak, that
sunnah
hadith.
goes to the first.
But as I said, weak hadith when it comes to meritorious acts, we can act upon. It's like we're still going to do it,
Yeah.
So there's no harm in holding to that. Like for example, the first of Ramadan is mercy, isn't it? We hear.
Yes.
The middle is forgiveness, and the last is emancipation from the fire. It's a weak hadith, but we see its manifestation in that basically this is the way I understand this hadith, is that mercy is because everyone gets involved, isn't it? Like even the people that aren't usually practicing, suddenly they become fresh with zeal in order to engage. That's a mercy from Allah, that He makes good acts easy for everybody. Then we slacken off a bit, don't we? We're like after 10 days we're like, okay, novelty's worn off. And so that's basically the next one's forgiveness. Those people that can keep it up in the second 10, they are more likely to gain Allah's forgiveness. And then if you can keep it up for the full 30, then it's emancipation from the fire. It's a huge, huge reward. And so what's Allah highlighting here? Sorry, the Prophet ﷺ is highlighting here is what's the word? Consistency. That's what Allah likes to see. That's the real blessing of that. I believe that's one of the signs that Allah's forgiven you from an act, when you consistently avoid it now. So, because that's a theological question, isn't it? How do I know if Allah's really forgiven me? Well, one of the signs is that He's actually given you the ability to avoid doing that anymore. And so that's so that you can consistently go through Ramadan and maintain it. This is a sign that Allah's really enabled you to benefit from Ramadan, and He's probably He's more likely to have accepted your acts in this month. Does that answer your question?
Yeah.
Yeah.